This is Gemara in Yevamos Daf Yomi. All learning should be incredible. Schidduch v'zochaim devar Tamar Tzipar Bas Tamar Tzipa Bas Peril Rachel Shom Levi Zabo v'Mitali Shem Ben Chaya Bluma Yudis Bas Sima Malka. You should all find their shidduch bekarov Amam Mishvas Chesfur Hashem Shal Yizay Nefreda Shmuel Ben Tila Navtal Zim Mechles Nechama Bas Yuva Sarah Buma Bas Mindel Bas Shava Vega Bas Shira Chana Sarah Bas Kila B'Soich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We pick it up on the bottom of Chav Tesam and Beis. We just finished a raya in what Rabbah held Beis Shammai was. Yesterday we discussed Rabbah had a shayla. Rabbah wanted to know. Rabbah shayla was about 18 lines from the white lines. Rabbah wanted to know Maimer leBeis Shammai doesn't do Suin or doesn't do Irisin. The Gemara went through a lengthy give and take between Rabbiah and Rabbah what the nafkamina was. Is it for Yerusha, Latamala, for Nadarela? The Gemara couldn't find the nafkamina. So finally, the Gemara concluded, and the Gemara found a raya. And the Gemara found a raya from a brisa that the Gemara said that we have a lengthy. The brisa began on the white lines, and the Gemara said, "What is the deal with a shoymeres yavam? Is there a din of mefer nidarel when one is awaiting yibum? Can he be mefer his potential yavama's vows?" And there we found the three-way machlekes. Rav Elazar said yes. Rav Yeshua said to one. Rav Akiva said no. So we said we understand Rav Yeshua and Rav Akiva, but where does Rav Elazar come from? Says the Gemara, how could he say that two women could both be made within a Nadarim when they are Shemeres Nadarel? So Rav Ami said it must be they did Maimer, so it's not a regular Shemeres Yavam in the conventional sense when awaiting Yavam. It's a Shemeres Yavam that did Maimer. That's how Rav Ami explained the Brisa, and we said it must be they did Nisu, and it therefore makes sense that they could be made for the Nadarim. Comes along, we're about 8 lines from the end of the Amma. The first one line is made for Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my mefer b'shodfis. Says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, there's no raya. This brisa, what it's referring to, is being made for the Nadarim b'shodfis together with the father, and therefore it could be the Maimer only does Erusin. And what did the Brisa mean? It could be made for the Nadarim together with the father. Says the Gemara, Rav Elazar, as we saw yesterday, that according to Rav Elazar, what does Maimer do? Only pushes away the tzara. It's not a kinyan. Am I made for b'shotfis? Why able to be made for the Nadarim with shotfis, with the partnership with the father? Rav Elazar, says Rav Elazar, let me clarify what I meant yesterday. What exactly did I mean when I said that Maimer pushes away the tzara? Says Rav Elazar, you know what I meant? I meant loisagi lo begita. I meant that it's not a full-fledged marriage, that one who does Maimer could just give his wife again and move on. Elo, rather, what do you need? Bo'inami chalitza lo for nedarel. Excuse me. You need chalitza together with the get because there's still some of the remnants of the original Yevamos there. But I did not say anything with regard to offering the darel. But rather, I'll agree that Maimer will allow the potential husband to be made for the darel together with the father. Says Rav Elazar, you Rav Nachman Yitzchak, is it any better? You're telling me that it's irisin and it means b'shotfes. Mikatani yafroi. The Brisa didn't say yafroi. Go back to the top of the white lines. What did Rav Elazar oimer? Yafer on the second white line. Yafer Katani. It's a singular, so how can you tell me it means b'shotfes? So if we're already forced into a corner how to explain this, Brisa says, Rav Elazar, you know what I'll tell you the Brisa is referring to? She'amda b'din upaskala mizaynais. Mishalai. The case is that there was a court case and the person who did Maimer agreed to supply her with food, and therefore that was and when one has an obligation to support, that gives him full power, and that is the reason why in this case, even though it's only Maimer and they're not fully married, he would be able to be made for Nadarel. Why? Because he's supporting her monetarily. And now we move over to Lamed Amid Aleph, and we begin a new Mishnah with some new cases. Shloisha Achin Shleimem Nesuyos Shtei Achayos. We have 3 brothers, 2 of them married to 2 sisters, Vechanasi Nachris, and one is married to an unrelated woman. Mis Echami Bale Achayos. One of the brothers married to the sister is Nifter. Vekanas Nasi Nachris, and the 3rd brother who's married to an unrelated woman marries that sister, marries that Rachel as then what happens next? Umeis, and then he dies. That 3rd brother, Levi, dies, and now he has his own wife in which he had married, who was unrelated, and now he has the new wife in which he didn't sue into Rachel. And now they both, of course, fall to Shimon. So the first wife, Reuven's ex-wife, Rachel, she leaves. She doesn't need anything because she's a Chayis Isha, because Shimon is married to Leah. Ushniya, and what about the unrelated wife? Mishom Tzarasat Saras Erva. Asaba Maimer. Let's say Levi does Maimer, Umeis, and then Levi doesn't do a full-fledged Nisu into Rachel. He does only Maimer. Then in Nochris Chayletzes Loimis Yabamais. Then the halacha is, then if Levi does Maimer to, again, that Rachel, what's the halacha? And then Levi dies. Nachris, which is Levi's unrelated wife, needs chalitza in this case. Let's pull up a picture for better understanding what's going on over here. Here we have it. We're going to try to keep them both up together because, as we're about to see, we're going to have a bunch of Mishnayos with very similar cases. So let's keep up these pictures over here. First of all, right now, Shlisha Achin, this is case number 1. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven and Shimon married to sisters, Rachel and Leah. Levi's married to an unrelated woman. We call her Rachel. What happens when Shimon dies? Levi does Yibam to Leah. Wonderful. What happens when Levi subsequently dies? So now his 2 what? Wives, Leah and Rivka fall Yibam to Reuven. And as you can see very simply, of course, Reuven cannot marry Leah. Why not? Because Leah is Reuven's wife's sister. Achais Isha. Reuven is married to Rachel. Leah is a sister. Achais Isha Erva Derais, and therefore there's no Yibam Chalitza at all. Rivka is a tzara. Is the co-wife of Leah, and therefore she as well now is the tzara of the Erva, and she as well requires nothing. But what happens if Levi didn't marry Leah fully? Levi only did Maimer. Then what's the halacha? Then Levi dies. Now Leah and Rivka fall even to Reuven. Let's understand who are Leah and Rivka now. Leah was not fully married to Levi. Leah only was partially married to Levi, and Rivka was always married to Levi. So now the question is, again, Leah, of course, Reuven can't do anything to because it's Achais Isha, it's a sister of his wife. But the question is, what about Rivka? Now it's not a tzara because Rivka and Leah were never married at the same time because it was only Kedushin to Leah. So halacha is, to Rivka, we require chalitza, as Daf Yomi beautifully points out on the bottom over here. Why? Because it's a Sarah Erva Mide Ra Banan. Let's go straight into the Gemara. Taima the Ovid B'Maimer. In the case that's still up in front of you. In this case, the reason in which Rivka, Levi's original wife, requires chalitza is why? Because they did Maimer to Leah. Haylo Ovid B'Maimer. Let's say Levi did not do Maimer to Leah, and I think we have a picture of this. Yes. Then what? Nochris Yevumi Nami Abmi. If let's say Levi did nothing to Leah, then Rivka could do Yibum. And Amar Rav Nachman, what do we see from here? Says Rav Nachman, we see over here that there is no Zika even when the Yevama only falls to one brother. So if Levi did not do Maimer with Leah, then Reuven is allowed to do Yibam with Rivka. Let's see for a moment. Rashi. Says Rashi, Nochris Yevumi Nam Yama V'lo Yamrinon Mishamis Bala Achois V'nofla Liyibom. Rashi explains the Havamina. Don't say that when Leah falls to Yibum to Levi, Huskekulinasli Nochris Levadai Dal Bala Achois Leramya. Because on the sister it's not applied. V'nasazu Sora Bezika Kshemes Tiasra Nochris Al Nishar Misham Soras Achois Isha. The Havamina would be that when Levi dies, maybe Reuven cannot marry Rivka. Why not? Because Rivka is a tzara of the Zika. The tzara of Achais is Zikukasai. So maybe that's what says the Gemara. We see from here, Ein Zika afilu bechad acha, that there is no Zika even when there is only one brother. And now let's continue into the next Mishnah. Hopefully this was clear, because the next Mishnah is going to piggyback off of this Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Shloisha achin shnei mem nesiya shtei achayis. Sounds very familiar. V'echan nasi nachris. Same thing. Umeisa nasi nachris. But now, v'konas echon mibal achayis es ishtoi. What happens over here? That first Levi dies, and Shimon goes and does Yibum to Rivka. Umeis, and then Shimon dies. So it's the same result that Leah and Rivka are falling to Yibum to Reuven, but it happened in a different sequence. What's halacha now? That's never going to change. Leah will never be allowed to do anything to Reuven because Leah is Reuven's wife's sister. Leah is a simple erva of Achais Isha. But Shnia, what happens to Rivka? So says the Mishnah the same thing. Beautiful Misham Sarasa. Because Shimon was married at the same time to Rivka and Leah, and therefore Leah is Achais Isha to Reuven. Rivka is what? The Tzara is the co-wife, and therefore Rivka as well is patterned. But Asa Ba Maimer, let's say Shimon doesn't marry Rivka, but Shimon does Maimer, Umeis, and then Shimon dies. Nochris Chayletz Lo Misabamas. The same thing. Rivka requires Chalitz, and of course everyone understands from the fact we have two Mishnayos that teach us the same din. What does the Gemara say? Hasu lamali hainu hach. It's the exact same thing as the first case. We'll make this picture bigger in one moment. But you already can see that we have to compare the two Mishnayos together to come out with a Chedesh. So says the Gemara, it's the same din. Explains the Gemara, it's part of the Kasha. Hashto ma'asam. If in the first Mishnah, Da'achais Isha, have yotzara l'nachris, and yet we said, Amrit Nachris Asura, if in case number one, let's zoom in on case number one. If in case number one, in which the Achais Isha was the Tzara to the Nachris, again, Levi is the one that did Maimer, and after Levi dies, they all fall to Ruvain. So if Rivka in this case is Achais Isha, Leah is the Achais Isha, and it's the Tzara to Rivka, and that's Aser. Halcha in case number two, the Nachris have a Tzara Achais Isha, and basically the question is, what happened first? That is the kasha of the Gemara. What should the difference be? In case number one over here, what happened first? That Levi is fully married to Rivka. Then Levi has some level of marriage to Leah, a Kiddushin Derabanan, and that some level of marriage still dictates that Rivka is a tzara, and therefore she needs chalitza to Ruvain. In case number two, what happened over here? In case number two, Shimon was fully married to Leah. Rivka, the unrelated woman, is the one that had the Kedushin Derabanan. So in this case, of course, she would be considered a tzara, because Leah is always the full sister, Achais Isha. Explains the Gemara. L'kosh again. Explains the Gemara, massive chiddush. Tanach, Tana Bereisha. Really, you know what happened over here? We learned the second Mishnah first. Why? And the second Mishnah thought that in the first Mishnah, there would have been a heter, Visharya. And we would have thought that in the first Mishnah, Rivka should have been mutter. Why should Rivka be mutter in the first Mishnah? Because the Levi was fully married to Rivka. And then Levi only did a minor marriage, a half a marriage, a Drabanan marriage to Leah. So the second Mishnah held that in the first Mishnah, after Levi dies, Rivka is allowed to do Yibum to Ruvain. The half marriage to Shimon will not forbid Levi. That's what the second Mishnah held. And I learned the second Mishnah. And then it decided, no, even this minor level, this Kedushin the Rabbanan, this quasi half level marriage to Leah will forbid. Because this first Mishnah now is a Chiddush. So originally we thought this was Mutter. Akadma, therefore we learned it first. And the Mishnah did not leave from his place. I hope that is beautifully clear. But let's just, for one moment, zoom in on this double Mishnayos. Let's just understand. I understand that it is getting late. Before we move on to the next Mishnah, let's just understand that the massive Chiddush over here is that in the first case on the left side of your screen, Levi was fully married to Rivka. So the second Mishnah held that in that case, when Levi dies, Rivka could do Yibum to Ruvain. Rivka is a co-wife to Leah. No, she's not. Because Leah was only Kedusha Derabanan. In the second case, where there was a full marriage to Leah, and the Sarah, the co-wife, was the one that was the quasi-marriage. Oh, now I understand that there's a full relationship between Reuven and Leah. So now this co-wife will require Chalitza. But in the first case, I would think, no, she could do Yibum. Kamash Malan. Not. And that's why we learned that case first. A beautiful Chiddush, says the Gemara. A beautiful Chiddush, and now a beautiful Chiddush, and let's go back and let's move on with the next Mishnah. Shaloisha achin shnayim em nesuah shtei achayis. Three brothers, as you see in front of you. Two of them are married to two sisters. Ve'echad nasi nachris, and one is married to a random woman. Meizach ba'al nachris v'kanas. And then what happens? Levi goes and does yibum. Meis echad mi bali achayis. They're completely wrong. Shimon dies. V'kanas nasi nachris as ishtai. And Levi goes and does yibum. Umeisa. And then who dies now? Not Levi. Umeisa with a hey. Now who dies? Reuven's wife. Rachel dies. As you see over here, Rachel's bladdered out. Rachel dies. Umeisa ishtai shel sheni. Umeisa ishtal shel sheni. Then Reuven's wife dies. Then Levi dies. So what happens now? Harezu asura lavalamis. Says the Gemara. Reuven to Leah, Asura love Alamis, Havlaneser love Sha'ach. Since there was one moment of time, this of course brings back memories. Since there was one moment of time in which Reuven was Asur to Leah, when was that? Go back. Okay, let's go to this case, three-step case. Okay, part one of the case, Reuven's married Rachel, Shimon's married Leah, everything's fine. Shimon dies, Levi does Yibum to Leah, everything's fine. At that moment, before Levi does Yibum, when Shimon dies, at that moment, is Reuven allowed to do Yibum to Leah? Of course not, because Leah is Reuven's wife's sister. Achais Isha. So can Reuven do anything to Leah? The answer is no. So since there was one moment of time that Reuven was usher to Leah, even though after Levi does Yibum, Reuven's own wife dies, so maybe one would think now when Levi dies, Reuven no longer is related to Leah, it's no longer Achais Isha, because Reuven's own wife is nifter. Says the Gemara, no, when there's one moment of time that they're usher, you are usher aylamis. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, says the Gemara, kol Yevamos she'einu nikar ba b'shas nefila. Yevama Yamala rezek ishes ach sheyesh lai banim. Any time, says Rav Yehuda, for the moment when they fall evil, it's not called Yevama Yamala. Therefore, forever you remain usher, as we just saw, as you see right here in this picture. Leah is always forbidden to Reuven, even though right now Leah is not related to Reuven. Right now, Leah is not the sister of Reuven's wife because Reuven's wife was nifter. Still, they are forbidden va'asura. Micah Mashlan says the Gemara, what's the chiddush? Tanina, what is the chiddush? We already learned this one time. Asks the Gemara. We already learned this one time. Where did we learn this one time? Says the Gemara, I don't understand. We already learned this before. Answers the Gemara, I would have thought, that is the Chiddush. This is, as you see in front of you, says the Gemara, that even though we seemingly already learned this in a previous Mishnah, but the Havamina was that it's only when the Lois Chazila b'Shas Nefila Rishayna. But in this case, that it was that in a case in which it is this Chazila b'Nefila Rishayna, you would have thought that maybe it should be mutter. Kamash lanat says Marhanani Tanina. We also learned this. Shnei acham nesuyos. Nope. Shnei acham nesuyos. Shnei achayos. Umeisacham meim bachach meisa ishtoi shel sheni. Harezo sur lavalam is hovenes lov shachas. We already seen this before. Now the Dame explains the Gemara. Asmu did chila mehai beisa legamri. Avloch lo etcham mehai beisa legamri. Ema migu dis chazla. Naso inachri migu dis chazla. So I would have thought, says the Gemara, since it's fit for one, since it's fit for the one to marry the nachris, chazinami lahai. Meaning, when Shimon was nifter, was Leah completely out of the picture? Absolutely not. Because when Shimon was nifter, Leah's mutter to Levi. Meaning, I would have thought, let's say we get rid of Levi from this equation, and this is your whole case. So when Shimon dies, Leah falls the Ibn to Ruvain. Could Ruvain marry or no? Because Ruvain's married to Rachel. So then I would think, even if subsequently Rachel dies, okay, I understand Leah remains forbidden for Reuven, because why? She was forbidden originally, but because it was totally pushed away. But maybe in this case, because Leah is fit to Levi, Leah, and indeed Leah does Yibam to Levi. So you would have thought that maybe after Levi dies, after Rachel already had died, maybe now Reuven could marry Leah. Kamash Milan says our Mishnah that no, it's Aser Lamis. Says the Mishnah, continuing with another case. Hopefully you sound familiar. Now, and of course this harkens us back to that which we learned all the way back in Daf Beis, that Girushin or a Misa removes them from the Parsha and allows an eventual story to continue, as we'll see right now. This really is a playing out of that which we saw in Daf Beis. So we have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Rachel and Leah. Shimon divorces Leah. Then Levi dies. And Shimon goes and marries Rivka. So now says the Gemara, what happens if if Shimon subsequently dies? Reuven could do Yibam to Rivka. Shimon was married to Leah and Rivka, and Leah is Reuven's Isser. Leah is Reuven's Achois Isha. Reuven is married to Rachel, so Leah is forbidden. But no, because Shimon divorced Leah and then married Rivka, when Shimon dies, Reuven will be able to marry Rivka. And of course, this is the case in which we saw in the first Mishnah. Says the Gemara, we just played it out in the case in which we just said. It sounds like only because Shimon, as you see in the sequence over here, part A, Shimon divorced Leah, then Shimon does Yibum, then Reuven can marry Rivka. But let's say Levi died and then Shimon divorced his wife Asura. We would think in that case it is usher for Reuven to marry Rivka. And Amar Avashi Zoisameres Yish Zika. What would it teach us? It would teach us Yish Zika Filu betray Achi. This would seemingly teach us that there's a Zika, but when Yevamos falls to two brothers, says the Gemara, if that is true, Rav Ashi, Kasha, dear Rav Nachman, this takes us all the way back to previous Gemaras. That according to Rav Ashi, it's fair from Rav Nachman. Amrulcha Rav Ashi, no kasha. Huadin daval gav deloyavid b'maimer. Same din is going to apply. You'll see the picture in a moment. I'll explain. Amal Charvashi, who again Avgad Lobba Maimer, Michlas Avgad Lobba Maimer, Nochris Michlas Cholza, Vume lo Yevamo. You would have to chalitza na yibam. V'hadik tani, that which we learn, Maimer la fuge beishame da'amri Maimer koine kenyin komer kamash malon. So what's the chiddush? Like beishamai. So we're teaching us not like beishamai. So you see over here that we can explain that the Mishnah is that even if Shimon divorced Leah after Levi dies, Reuven still can do Yibam with Rivka. Why? Because then we're going to say Ein Zika Filu Bechad. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman Kasha. What do we do with Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman Kasha Rav Ashi. Maybe you can explain to us. Then that Filu Meizacha Girish Sarasa Mutar. As Eluzui Lamute Mais. What's the Zui coming to exclude? Lamute Kanas Vachach Girish. Says the Gemara again. Oh, Nichas Avlak Rav Yirmiyah. Tamar Tavra Mishan Zuloshan Azu. If each Mishnah is isolated, then it makes a lot of sense. Remember that machlokes? The machlokes, what causes the case of Yibam? Is it the Misa or is it the Nesuin? And the difference being, do we take the snapshot at the moment of Misa or do we take the snapshot at the moment of Nisuin? Here you go. Do we take the snapshot? Do we say Misa Mapeles or do we say Nisuin Mapeles? Okay, we'll go through these pictures in a moment. Zui lemute kanas lubesoif giresh ali savar lo keravo damar leilim chatanu. Really, it's all one tana. V'zu ein zarach lemer zukatani. Zui lemute mai al karchal krav yirmiyas fir leiul rava hani chisav lo krav hashi. Zui lemute meis lo giresh ali savar lo krav nachman. Zui lemute mai al karchal krav hashi sphere leil. And again, these were all the shitas which we saw back on Daf base. Let's just for a moment at least go through these pictures to get a basic understanding and review of exactly what's going on. Says the Gemara that this is going to be l'chayra. This was the kasha of the Gemara. The same machlokes whether we say v'kulin shemeis and iskarsha serviseya mutarais. Is it only kanas v'achach giresh or even giresh v'achach kanas? As you see over here, you have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven, and of course this was how the Mishnah played out the case of Gerushin in the fact that Leah is related in Erva to Reuven, as it says here, Bitoi. So says the Gemara that Shimon married Leah and Shimon is married to Rivka at the same time, and then Shimon divorces Leah. So then when Shimon dies, what happens? If you'll Misa Mapeles. So when do we take the snapshot? Right here. And right here, when Shimon dies, is Shimon married to Leah and Rivka? No. Because Shimon already divorced Leah. So then Rivka is not Saras Arava, and then Rivka will be able to be married to Reuven. Or do we say no? Is it only Garash v'achar kach kanas? That Shimon had to have first divorced them and only then married Rivka. Why? Because then we're saying Nisuin Arishonim Abeles. That when do we take the snapshot? Not when Shimon dies, but when he gets married. Do we look at the moment that Shimon married Rivka? Was he married to someone that was usher to Reuven? If at the moment he married Rivka, he was married to someone usher to Reuven, that itself will forbid. And with that, we continue into the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah of Kulan, Shayev and Kedushin are Gerushin Besafek. Harilu Atzaras Cholzos Lo Misabamais. Anytime we have a Safek Kedushin or a Safek Gerushin, which will really be tomorrow's discussion, then what's the halacha? As you see over here, Reuven and Shimon is, we're not sure. Maybe married to Leah, maybe divorced from Leah. What do we do right now? Then Shimon dies, and of course the shaila is, Leah is also to Reuven. So is Rivka the tzara of this person also to Reuven or not? Says the Mishnah, you have to do Chalitza. Ketzat. Says the Gemara, what's the case? Safek Kedushin. Sarek la Kedushin, Safek Arla, Safek Arla. You throw your wife, Kedushin. You throw her the ring, you throw her some form of kedushin, throw her some money, and you're not sure, you're in 8 amos. If it's within her 4 amos, she is kind of with her kinyan chatzar. Within your 4 amos, you're kind of, you're not sure where it landed. You're not sure if it's exactly in the middle. Zeu Safek kedushin. Safek gerushin, what's that case? Kasav. You writ a get with your own hand, writing without any edim, or yesh lav edim vein b'zman, or yesh b'zman vein b'yalid echad. Either there's a problem with the edim, the witnesses, with the time on the get, or with the or is only an echad. Zeu safek gerushin. So in all these cases, what is the halacha? The halacha is you do chalitza and not yibam. And tomorrow we are going to pick it up from the Gemara, in which we'll discuss what is the case by gerushin. Exactly how is it going to play out? Safek gerushin. Stay tuned.